Have you ever been so set on one path in life, only to realise that fate had something completely different in store for you? For Corey McKernan, the path wasn't always AFL. It could have been golf. It could have been something else entirely, but life is a funny way of pushing us toward where we're meant to be. From a reluctant teenager dodging his coach's visits to becoming one of the most dominant ruckmen of his time, Corey's journey is one of resilience, adaptability, and the power of finding your why. He's played alongside legends, faced the highs of premiership glory, and navigated the deep lows of personal and professional struggles. But what happens after the final siren? How does a champion athlete translate those lessons into everyday life? And what does it take to truly perform, not just on the field, but in the game of life? Today, we sit down with Corey to dive into the mindset, the memories, and the moments that shape his story. Welcome to the Success Times Happiness podcast. Let's get into it. Corey McKernan, thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Thank you.
How do you reflect on your AFL career? Or how do you reflect as during the time that you were a footballer?
I think at the end of the day, you're pretty proud of the body of work. Whilst the consistency could have been better, but in terms of, I think the lessons that now when you look back at it does it help you with, am I able to transfer that to everyday life 100%? And even at the time, I know Dennis Pagan was a pretty hard taskmaster, but I think I've even said that to Dennis recently. It's probably the biggest compliment you can pay him, like in terms of a lot of the things that nowadays are probably deemed as old school values, but I think in terms of overall, you're pretty proud about the body of work that not only during that time that it was the things that you're able to do individually, but I think it was also what we were able to do as a team. That when you look at North Melbourne during that period, we were the best team in the competition, and yet we by far and away had the worst facilities in the competition. So it just goes to show anyone out there, if you've got a big enough vision and a big enough why about what you're wanting to achieve, it doesn't really, obstacles like that, so-called obstacles that nowadays probably people would hang their hats on. Well, for us, we didn't care. And as I know Wayne Carey often says it, and he would quote Dennis that a 20-pound dumbbell is still a 20-pound dumbbell. Doesn't matter how it looks, you still got to lift it. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, it's a long-winded answer from your question. Is probably, overall proud. And probably that you can, and even the resilience that it takes to play football. And again, they're things that thankfully I think I've been able to incorporate into everyday life about working hard and having structure and routine and these sorts of things that has enabled me to do some pretty cool things.
Take me back to childhood, or at least adolescence, and you're growing up in the western suburbs of Melbourne. Obviously AFL is a religion. Destined, that's your goal, or you're a pretty good golfer.
Had no interest in playing football whatsoever.
Perfect.
Here's the thing. North Melbourne used to run the school zone at Gladstone Park. So Gladstone Park's not far from Tullamarine. Eventually, I played junior football at West Meadows, which is the same club as Dane Swan played for. So it's out, you're right, in the sort of northwestern suburbs. But for me, I played footy at West Meadows from when I was 5 till I was about 13. And then I stopped playing club footy, and then I started playing golf. I think that might have been around the time I was inspired. I was already going with Dad on a weekend to have a bit of a hit at golf, but then I think it really kicked into overdrive. I often used which is a long time ago now, but I think they're one of the main reasons that set me up why I really got passionate about golf was the 1986 US Masters. And for those that know the Masters, that was Greg Norman. He went on a charge, and it was the famous one where Nicholas shot 30 on the back nine on Sunday, and then the Shark birdie 4 holes in a row, and then he bogeyed 18, and that was the first time of him ripping our hearts out. But so really I started playing golf from where I was 13 up until I was about 17, but I still kept playing school football.
Right.
So then North Melbourne were in charge of our school zone, and then eventually word got back to Dennis Pagan, and Dennis Pagan would come out. He was
He was the head coach at that point?
No. So he was the under-19s coach,
right?
And then he ended up becoming the senior coach many years later.
Yeah.
to the point where Dennis would actually come out to my house in Gladstone Park and I'd go and hide. Like, I'd see that silver Chimera coming down the court and I'd tell Mum to tell him I'm not home. So it was quite funny. I think about round 6 or 7, he ended up, and he couldn't get me to go down and play. And eventually, I think he might have got me on the phone at a weak moment, and he goes, how he talks, he goes, listen, son, he goes, you don't have to come to Tuesday training. And I thought, yes, that's smart, because that was always the hardest session. He goes, come down Thursday night, train on Thursday night, come and play on Saturday, and then see how you go. So then I went down, we played St Kilda at Arden Street, and I kicked 5 goals in the first quarter, and then ended up kicking 11. And then the decision was sort of made for me from then. And then it was quite funny. He had those prophetic words at the time. He said, he calls everyone son. He goes, listen, son, he goes, you probably won't kick 11 goals ever again. And guess what? He was right. Kicked 8. I think I kicked 8 in the senior game. But yeah, from that day on, I really ended up at sort of North Melbourne, and that was the famous under-19s that Dennis Pagan was in charge. I think they played in the grand final something like 6 to 7 years in a row. They played an under-19 grand final, which is like 3rd grade. But like as fate would deal the hand, Dennis would become senior coach, and those people the stars aligned. That there were maybe half the team or 3/4 of the team that played in that North Melbourne 1996 team had all come through Dennis Pagan's under-19s, like the famous under-19s at North Melbourne. So, yeah, it was the decision was really made for me. People ask me, they go, do you ever regret not playing golf? Look, I don't. You don't know. Like I mentioned off the top, there's things I know now from playing football in terms of work and things like how hard you work and things like that I learned. But then also, it's hard not to think back at that point when I was 17. That was under the old handicap system, and my handicap was 3 then, which in the current handicap system would be like playing off scratch or +1, because no one in the early 90s was off scratch at all. There were 2 guys in Victoria that were off scratch. No one was off plus. But whereas it's how many times, for those who know golf, there's a lot of guys that are off +2, 3, 4 nowadays, and back then that was unheard of. But again, borrowing an old Dennis Pagan line about my golf and football career, well, if you only have whiskers, should be your uncle too. So I don't think I can contemplate about what might have and what could have possibly happened.
Yeah. You sign up to the senior team, and that was in 1993.
Yeah.
And then following year, you're on the start list. 94.
Yep.
I want to know, from what I can see, and I've followed AFL probably on average probably a greater level than most Queenslanders. Seems to be from 93 to 96. It's not a very long period of time for a ruckman, a tall forward, to get under his legs to perform at the level that you did, and 96 seems to have been the year of years for you, where you've come in your 3, 4, 5, your 4th year in, you'd be in your early 20s. You're the predominant ruckman in that group. You're being coached by Pagan. You've got Wayne Carey up the forward line. You become the AFL's MVP. You're the most valuable player in the whole league, and you become premiership, and you would have won the Brownlow but for a suspension. How does that sit with you in the sense of you were so young relative to a career, and especially given the position that you were in as a ruckman?
Oh, look, I'll go back and explain the mentality, but I also think for anyone out there listening, I think whenever I hear about young athletes or players getting thrown into like if you were coming into the NRL or the AFL, or if you tell players that they're young and they've got time, guess what? They'll take their time. And I think in terms of maybe that was great with Dennis Pagan, that when we won the 1996 grand final, or even 94 and 95, well, 94 wasn't really playing in the ruck, but 95 and 96, Matthew Capuano and I were 21 and 22 years old. We're playing in the ruck. So it makes me a little bit, I don't get angry, but I'm like, don't tell young guys that. If you're on the list, you're there for a reason. You've got talent, and it probably happens nowadays with the younger kids that come in. The top draft picks have already got that mentality already. Like they've already got your mentality. Hey, I'm here to do a job. 100%. If you're there, you do all the preparation and you believe in yourself and go out with that mentality. I belong, whether you do or not. But I think, like I said before, can you imagine if I had just put my hand up back then and said, "Oh, no, I'm young. I'll take my time." Or
even that mentality, right?
I just reckon it's a really bad mentality. I get angry about it. Like if someone's in there and you get your opportunity, just take your opportunity. No excuses, no alibis. Go in there and take your chance. So, but it probably even stemmed back. It probably for me, it was going into the 93 season, just a short little lesson about how I got to 94. And it, like 92, didn't really want to play football at all. Still wasn't sold on it.
Still missing Tuesdays at session?
No, just like, but I was actually on the senior list at North Melbourne. But I wasn't really that keen on it. But eventually, I think I played a couple of good games that year and thought, hang on, you know what? So I had a massive pre-season. I took my weight from 87 kilos up to 100.
Wow.
And I mean, ate like a literal horse. Like I was eating so much that I'd get to dinner and I couldn't eat.
You were 80 kilos at 6'6".
I was 87 kilos. So
lean.
Yep. So then I bulked myself up.
Yeah.
But then what happened, and I still remember it, does everyone remember the Guns N' Roses played at Calder Park on Australia Day 1993? The reason why I remember it is that we had a camp that weekend, and by the Monday, the short version is I'd ruptured my appendix. So I went into hospital on the Monday of Australia Day 1993. Still remember what day it was, and hot day. Eventually they had a really bad storm out of Calder Park. Probably better off I didn't go. But I went from 100 kilos back to, I lost all that weight within 3 or 4 days. Like when you rupture your appendix, you apparently you can actually die from it. So then what happened, for that 1993 season, I was playing catch up. North Melbourne, at the start of that season as well, Wayne Schimmelbusch got sacked and Dennis Pagan become coach. So then North went really on this trajectory. Well, all of a sudden they were become a good team under Dennis. I was emergency something like 11 or 12 times in 1993. So then, again, not taking any excuses, I went into 1994 and said, rather than, and again, advice out there for any in business or sport or anything, I went, no, I'm not going to rely on anyone else. I'll become that good that it's your problem I'm not going to be the emergency one anymore. So I had a crazy pre-season. Thankfully, I sort of bulked myself up, but I got myself to a decent size, strength and weight. And then that was really my breakout year where I basically won the AFL Rising Star. But I joke about it that Greg Norman was my idol in golf, but I always found ways to lose major awards. Like Greg Norman found new ways to lose golf tournaments. So I lost the Rising Star in 94. But yeah, look, it's from a mentality point of view, that's a part of that. I mean, you control your own destiny. Like I didn't want to go into that next season hearing those same things, like using their feedback as going, okay, they're effectively, I looked at it that I'm not good enough or I'm on the periphery, whether like again, being young, but I go, nah, I'll become that good that you have to play me. I don't care who else that you make the emergency. That's your problem. So thankfully, from 94 onwards, I was in the seniors all the time.
What was the catalyst that switched your mentality though to go from this is?
No, I think it was just at the end of 1992, going into that, that I might have played a couple of good finals games or like I was in the reserves and I didn't really care. Like I'm just rocking up to the footy. Yeah, I was doing training and with the seniors, but I didn't, because I'd been playing golf all that time, I wasn't really super hungry for footy. Like I look at that time and probably still do. Yeah, I like footy and played it because I was good at it, but I loved golf. You know what I mean? I love playing golf. And so that was the difference. But I've never regretted it. But yeah, just from a mentality point of view, I just went, well, don't rely on other people. You know what I mean? Like I'd basically use the off season to become better and then make it their problem. And thankfully I did.
At that point with the Brownlow, you were given the most points in the history of the Brownlow up to that point.
But it's probably the best week of my whole life, like that entire week. Because as you mentioned, I was still only 22 years old, and just a backstory, in the prelim final, I'd hurt my knee. I did my posterior cruciate, which is that ruckman's injury where you go knee on knee. So I got injured probably halfway through the first quarter in the prelim final against Brisbane. But the weird thing is, even from the moment that had happened, and we went on to win by 10 goals in the prelim final, I'd made up my mind I was playing in the grand final. Like it was never ever in doubt for me that I was going to do everything possible. I remember Saturday night, I was in a hyperbaric chamber looking through the window as Tony Lockett kicked a point to beat Essendon and play us in the grand final. And the way I handled that whole week, I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. Like, the fact that the Brownlow happened on the Monday, had to deal with all that, then go to training on the Tuesday. For those that don't know, I actually have got a Brownlow medal because McDonald's had a promotion that year, and Wayne Carey and Anthony Rock stopped at McDonald's and they got a meal deal. And
so good.
You know what? It actually probably, for those people listening, it would mean things like that mean more when they come from your mates.
Yeah.
Than probably, with the greatest respect to the umpires. Well, the Brownlow a bit is like the TB Week Logie Awards. Like the TB Week Logie Awards, every time it comes around every year, everyone takes an interest in it. But when was the last time you bought TB Week? You know what I mean? So the Brownlow, with the greatest respect now, has just become the biggest. I think it's so wrong now with the Brownlow that effectively, if you and I, and I'm saying gambling responsibly, but if we were going to have a punt, there's only 10 guys capable of winning it, which I think is wrong. For your award that's meant to signify the best player in the competition, we really have got to come up with a better way of identifying who's the best player. Because we know at the start of the year that there's only a certain amount of guys can win. And for those people listening, follow my advice, right? If you want to see, and then if you get to September and you go, you know what, Brownlow medal night, look through the stats, and if a player has maybe around 20 to 25 touches and kicks 2 or 3 goals, lock them in for 2 or 3 votes. Because that's what happens. Look what happened with Cripps last year. Look, Dustin Martin.
Yeah.
All these sorts of players, I'm not saying they're not deserving of it, but the thing that I don't like, that where we've got to now, how many goals would you have to kick to win the Brownlow?
As a goal kicker.
As a goal kicker.
Yeah.
But mind you,
Do you think they're limited to centres?
Well, we could sit down at the start of the year. Who are the players capable of doing what I said?
Patrick Cripps,
Do you think that it's because the umpires are just seeing the box scores at the end of the game rather than getting their own sense as who was the most influential, who had the best?
I think after the last few years, and when you're seeing like last year, Paddy Cripps had 45 votes.
Yeah. And of a team that didn't particularly perform very well either.
But the thing that when I say change the criteria, I think you've either got to tell the umpire who has had the biggest influence on winning this game. Don't just go out and, like you said, it's like we got metrics now. That's you're proving it right. My theory every year: if you have 20 or 25 and kick 3 or 4, you're in. If they have 30 plus and kick goals, just lock it down. Forget about it. And even the guys that punt on the Brownlow, I reckon they look for those sort of metrics. But, you know what I mean? You feel for, like, imagine being the gun defender. Imagine being a Jacob Wiedering from Carlton, who I think's the best defender in the game.
Doesn't get many.
He wouldn't even get a vote.
Yeah.
What does that say about our award? That a defender can not even get a single vote, but everyone goes, oh yeah, we just accept it. Why do we accept it?
Yeah. So for those who don't know, you're ineligible if you get suspended throughout the year.
So sorry, grand final week. Back to that. I know it's a bit of a rant.
No. So you're 22. You're in the.
So that was on the Monday.
Yeah, but no, I want to get your mind. So you're in a hyperbaric chamber. You say it was the best week, but you're also given the most points, most votes.
But you know what? And to this day, I've never ever cared about it, because in the end, I think we might have spoken about this before we were coming on here, and it only made sense maybe over the last few years. Like, I ended up watching the video from Simon Sinek about like finding your why. You know what I mean? And if you got a really big, powerful why, you can do anything. It's the same as parents will do anything for your kids. You know what I mean? Because you got this unbelievable why. You'll get up in the middle of the night and you'll do whatever you can. When I look back at it, my why in 96 was about, I wanted to win a medal for all the teammates. Like we had Craig Scholl, Darren Crocker, Lades, all these people, Ian Fairley, all these guys have been around. That was my why. So to be able to, having a really big, powerful why meant that you think all the things that I had thrown at me that week. I had the Brownlow. On Wednesday, I went to Vimy House and they actually said to me, go, Corey, you probably shouldn't play. I had 30 or 40 mils of blood drained out of my knee. I won't say what I said to the doctors I gave him some fairly strong feedback. But to be able to put all that behind me and then come out in the grand final, like I had 31 possessions in the grand final. Like no ruckman's ever done that in the history of the game. So for me, I'm more proud how I had the entire world thrown at me and still to be able to put all that to the side and not only perform, but go out and play one of the best games I'd ever played I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Yeah, right. And then talk to me about Dennis, because he's come up a lot just in our conversation today. His by all accounts comes from a place of like an real old school mentality, and probably I'm not sure whether it would have in this environment would
No.
be considered a quality coach or different. It's almost a change of.
It was the actual perfect coach for that environment at that time.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't have got a better, and for that group, you know what I mean? Like there were a few lads in our group, but I think if people ask me, did he ever come up with, like you hear with the greatest respect, like Mick Moldhouse or Kevin Schutte, they might come up with these great words, but Dennis, I'll fast forward on this. This is why I wasn't surprised that Dennis became a horse, he's a horse trainer and his horse won the Derby. You're not surprised at that, because the greatest thing that he would have taught us and the biggest legacy he'd leave with us is how you prepare. Like if your preparation, I bet you for today, and you can see you've done your preparation, what happens if you don't prepare? What are you like? You're all uptight. Football's exactly the same thing. If you just do your training on a Monday, Tuesday, we had a checklist that I've still got now, and I showed Dennis when I caught up with him. We did a thing for Walk With Me, and I showed Dennis, I go, I can still rattle off that list of what he's got, but I still had the list. And it's amazing the correlation between that list and how you would play. Like, every week would I mark it down? No, I wouldn't. But if I went through and I knew the list off the top of my head: weights, diet, lifestyle away from the club, extra skill sessions, recovery, all these things. It's probably more, it comes home to roost when you haven't played a good game. Because then you look back at it and go, how was my training this week? And I mean, like, not just, oh yeah, we're out of train, but I mean really, did I run through to the cones? Was my voice? Did I stay and do extra goal kicking? Did I, this week, I don't know, did I...
Centers, yeah.
Yeah, all these little things. And it's amazing and I recommend that for anyone. Like, I know it's something we talk about with Walk With Me, that if you develop your own checklist, it's not only going to help you be consistent, but it's going to stay as a high performer. And that list, when you think about it, anyone that would come into our football club, you could show them, hey, you want to be successful around here? It's no different to any work environment. If you say, right, if you follow these, there's probably 8 or 9 things on there, but in any organisation, if you follow those things, you're going to go a long way and you're going to be consistent.
I love that. I love that approach. And then how it sounds like as well that to your point about wanting to win the medal with the team, that there was this beautiful, almost serendipitous environment where all these guys had been through the under-19 program with Dennis. Dennis is now the head coach. You've got such a close group, worst facilities of the league, but still the best team. You come into that environment, I guess, on age, on the younger side of that group, and you've got huge personalities, with Bladley, like Kerry. And what are you, as that young kid, are you looking up to them as idols, as mentors? How are you dealing with that?
We had this, and again, I'm not, how do you best put this? Like, we had this wonderful thing at North Melbourne called the footy trip. I'm not advocating that with anyone out there about drinking or whatever, because I do obviously do the stuff in the physical and mental health and stuff like that. But to answer your question, everyone was nearly treated as equal at North Melbourne. Like, no one was sacred, like as in you could hang some basically shit on people, like, but done in the right way. So it didn't matter whether you were Wayne Carey down to a kid, everyone was pretty much treated the same.
Who was instigator of that in the culture?
I reckon I put it down to Craig Scholl, because they're country boys, and
the idea that the 19-year-old rookie is treated the same as...
Well, I just found, like, even as I mentioned before, and even we went out of our way, like even something like this, and I know clubs have gone so far the other way where they ban the footy trip, but it's no different. I compare it, like, it could be even from a work point of view. Like, you could work with someone, you have no idea what they're like, but all of a sudden, if you, again, having a couple of drinks, go to the pub, get to know them, what happens next time you come into work? You've automatically... And we had the same thing. Like, even the North Melbourne, like, footy trips during that time, and again, I know a lot of people frown on footy trips. I'm not going to say everyone's a patron saint, so let's get that out of the way. But the best thing I wanted to do is, as I mentioned, in the end, on my first footy trip, I'm having a beer with Wayne Carey or John Longmire or Alex Ashenko, all these senior blokes. By the time I then come back the following season, I'm feeling a bit more comfortable about myself, that I can either remind them something that happened on the footy trip or a bit of banter. I feel that much more comfortable. And again, we would go during that period at North Melbourne for about 10 years. If someone couldn't afford to go on the footy trip, or we found that out, we'd pay for them.
Yeah,
we'd pay for them to go, because we knew everyone's
part of it.
Everyone was part of it. And then other clubs would actually come to us and say, I remember James Hird and Matthew Lloyd went to Wayne Carey and said, how do you do it?
How do we do this in Essendon?
Yeah, like, how do we recreate this? But I don't know, and I think a lot of that happened sort of organically. Like, we were lucky that we played so much Friday night footy. Like, can you imagine even nowadays, like, they'll be up in arms when Collingwood or Hawthorn or Carlton get 4 or 5 Friday night games. 1998, we played 12 Friday night games.
Yeah, right.
So
that allowed the whole weekend to...
bond. Yeah. So we'd either play Friday night, maybe have a few beers Friday night, and then that's the other thing that was, and I said this to Craig Scholl recently, I caught up with him and he was in Coolum. I said, Charlie, do you know how, like, on a Saturday morning, we go around the Shouleys and have bacon and eggs? Like, now, okay, bacon and eggs, sometimes people are going to frown on it.
As a group?
But again, there'd be 8 to 10, 12 guys that would go around there, and Andrea, his wife, we'd have bacon and eggs. Sometimes we end up jumping in the spa, which you probably shouldn't do. But again, that was also, I think Australian sports are vastly different to every other sport around the world. Like, at the end of the day, when you can connect, like, with that mateship, and again, there's a time and a place about how you do it, but teams that are connected like that, you find even the grand final teams, you'll hear stories like, even Carlton a couple of years ago when they really turned it around, what did they do? They went down the beach and they had a big barbecue at Charlie Curnow's house. So I know we're in that sports science era, but how do you...
There is a lot about the connection.
100%. And it's even from the feel good, how do you put a price on feeling good? Like, how do you, for example, and I'm big on this, like, so for example, my goal kicking, I look at it like putting in golf. Unless you practice it, you're not going to get better at it. But you hear some of the stories nowadays that the sports science guy will come out and say, hey, you've had enough, you've got to go inside.
Too many kicks.
But then I'd rather go out there with a bucket of balls. Like, when I do play, it's a feel thing. Yeah. You want to go until you feel like you've got it right. So I don't know. I understand there's a science aspect of what we do, but there's also, hey, I want to feel good about it too.
Yeah. Simon Sinek does. He talks about this idea of that the human species is a cultural species. Like, we're designed evolutionarily to build bonds, to build connections. That's what we're here. Exactly. That's what we're here for. And so that's where, like, in business, but certainly in a team sport, you you get a really high performing group when you've built that really strong connection, and you're like, I'm here not because yes, we want to win a premiership, but primarily I'm here to show up for him and for him, the person to the left, the person to the right of me.
Yeah.
I don't want to let them down. And if that means premiership, that means premiership. But ultimately, I just want to do my bit for this team, for this community.
Yeah.
And so, I think in business, it's very easily, you can do that. You can implement that in business. And as you grow, that becomes harder because the connections.
And it's got to happen naturally. I think sometimes people, whatever you do, my advice would be make sure it's not too manufactured.
It's not forced.
Some of it's got to happen organically. It can't be so far out of the realm. If you've never done anything, I think you've got to start with baby steps, and you know what I mean? Like, I think, sometimes people aren't silly when you're going to try and create something that is, hang on, this is so left of field of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, fair play. But even you can, it just seems to be what went through that group was, and maybe because the under-19 connection, maybe with Pagan, I don't know, but
it probably did help that again, there's all sorts of different leaders, but if I had a choice of, and again, it's the type of leader I like is different to maybe even the type of you like, but I know from definitely a footballer point of view, the leader style of a Luke Hodge, Stephen Kernahan, Jonathan Brown, Wayne Carey, those really, they're the alpha males. You know what I mean? They're the old school alpha males, and they probably work hard and play hard. They know there's a time and a place to do either, and they're the ones that, I don't know, I mean, the ones I've mentioned, they're probably not the worst leaders that you'd ever want to follow into battle, are they?
No, that's right. And then talk to me how, when everything happened with Wayne, I guess off the field, how that impacted you personally as a leader of the club?
I made a conscious decision because I'd, by that time, gone to Carlton. So I went to Carlton for 2 years, and that was my first year at Carlton, I think it was. And to this day, like, I just made a conscious decision that they're both my mates. Even though I might see Wayne a lot more, but I played in the premiership with Steve-O and I played with the premiership with Wayne. So I made a real conscious decision to go, that's with what you blokes do and how you treat it. There were probably, I don't know, there were a lot of guys that ended up sort of choosing sides and whatever, but I don't know, how do you get taught to handle something like that? But personally, I'd made a choice from the beginning. They're both my mates, and
that's talking to how you dealt with them as friends, which is admirable. I was sort of more thinking about how if they're leaders, and in your mind, I guess they're colleagues, but you're looking up to them as well. When that happens, does that do anything to you personally? Like, you open up the fourth wall almost to say people are vulnerable, people are not infallible, and that somewhat they see, sort of maybe is it the case that you go like your idol is not everything you thought it would be, or
look,
how did you personally sort of deal with the experience?
I think the overwhelming thing of a small sadness with the whole thing, because as we've kept talking about today, the one thing that we did have going for us and always did have going for us was the fact that we were so close. And I knew at the time, and it still rings true even up until last year or the year before when we have a reunion, it's always there. And I don't know, and again, I'm not privy to whether there's been apologies or any of that, but I don't like it because it's sad. That's the overwhelming emotion but you know what? After the last time when all that stuff had happened, I'm of the opinion now, I'm over it. I'm seriously over it. Yeah. If we want to get together, this is what we're going to do. If you guys need to get in the ring and do whatever you need to do, go and sort it out.
Yeah.
But whilst I'm sad about, and yes, we've all been through that, I've now come out the other side and I'm like, nah, bugger that. This is, for such a great team and for teams that won a couple of premierships during that time, it's having too much of an influence and it's too overbearing on what is overshadowing that. So I'm like, I don't care anymore. If you turn up, great. If you don't, I'm not. That's up to you. You know, what I mean, because I'm missing seeing like some of the great guys that we're all mates with in that time. You know what I mean? And reliving like what we're talking about today, like that. Yeah, there were holes in the floor and in the gym, and it was like David King hit it on the head. I think he said that North Melbourne was a country AFL team. That was the best way to describe it. That you had Judy Fran, and this is the other thing, that each club's different with its own, its own way that it goes about it. And again, I'll quote Dennis Pagan, like he said, the greatest strength of the North Melbourne Football Club is the people that are there. And we had people that were, and this is what I'd even say, and I hope that North would all even get back to this, where you find your DNA, right? Like we had people that were as revered as Wayne Carey. Like you had Judy Francis, that was she would come in and cook all the food, and she'd call a spade a shovel. She was a big lady, but she didn't give a shit what she used to say. But then we had the trainers that were the characters, like Ron McIntosh and Jack Castle, and the thing that it taught you, if you buy into being a North person, you can be as revered as a Wayne Carey and respected as a Wayne Carey at North Melbourne. And that's what that period really proved. Like when we do have our reunions, you make a point that you want the trainers to come, you want those staff. And again, I'm a big believer that, especially with the NFL, I'm a big believer in this. What happens with the AFL is wrong, that only the premiership players get a medallion. Because
Sure.
It's
the whole squad.
It's the whole squad. It's not just the playing squad. That person that plays one game, that if you're in Melbourne middle of winter when it's shitty and wet, and you turn up to training and you've taken part in all the drills and helped them get there.
Yes.
And then the same as the staff that I mentioned, the staff should get 100%, because you look at every team that wins a premiership, like even Richmond in recent years. How did they win it? Because they went and got a gun CEO. They had Brendan Gale. Then your footy manager, they had Neil Baum. Then you have Peggy O'Neill. You've got to...
Tribe.
Yeah, it is backwards what we do. Like there's so many backwards things that we do, and it's in today's environment from a mental health point of view as well. Like you think that someone like a Bob Murphy played for Western Bulldogs, played every game for the year, and got injured and missed the grand final.
Yeah.
Like how do you know what I mean? I get there's these people, we're tradition and whatever. Come on, spare me about the tradition stuff.
Like the Lion Ruckman.
Correct. That happened. Yeah, big Oscar McInerney.
Yeah.
Not only plays the whole years, he's carried the Brisbane Lions the last 5 years on his own, and the one game that he missed out on is the one where they hold the cup. Like that's wrong. You know what I mean? But it's about the players, but I think it's also celebrating the staff.
You might be onto something there, because on a mental health position, because then you are doing a disservice to the player, because you're saying you are a premiership player, but not giving credit to the team, the broader team.
It's stupid. We're saying we got this one club mentality. Then you're the only person that gets the accolades of the players.
And then so then it puts a really unfair, I guess, cloak on the player to say, who are you without this? But then also it diminishes the role of the greater team. And then, as you say, you put those 17 or 21 players, or without the CEO, without the trainers, without the body maintenance team, all the things, they don't win a premiership.
And some of those guys too, look, I know that times have changed and even your off-field staff are getting paid, but they're still, all right, they're not getting paid. Like all your football department spend, that's going to go into your senior coach, your assistant coach, and your players. Trust me, a lot of those staff that are there, they're not earning big dollars, but yet they're not only turning up and preparing for training. So imagine the players and the duration they're at training. Remember those guys, they're going to be there before and after training. So the amount of hours that they're doing at the rate that they're getting, it's like, I know that, look, I might have even heard that some of the clubs actually do something, which is great, that the clubs acknowledge something themselves. But to answer, I'm a big believer they should all get a medallion.
Now, Pepe Voetti connected us. He's one of Queensland's #1 shin boner fan club. He talked to me about a story how you first found out about being traded to Carlton.
No, well, I made a decision at the end of 2000. So I'd gone to Carlton. I'd already been there 1 year, so I was already at Carlton. Like, I'd already had a year there.
What made the decision?
Well, I'd had enough of Dennis. Like, I think at that time, look, my greatest regret is that I should have told Dennis to go and stick a lot of things. Yeah, I mean, I reckon if I had a fought back like Wayne Carey and Glenn Archer did, would have been the best thing for me. So I probably too many times copped what he said and just wore it. And in the end, it probably affected me too much. And then I got to the end of 2001 and said, no, I'm going to go, requested to go to Carlton. First year at Carlton, started off scratchy, but then come back and then won the Carlton Best and Fairest. Said I'd made my mind up. I went to New Zealand, go to New Zealand. This is the short version. Remember Jason McCartney, he was sending me text messages going, you've got a new coach that's coming. There's rumours it's going to be Dennis. And I didn't really see the funny side of it because I'd left North Melbourne to get away from him.
Yeah.
And then when I landed at Tullamarine Airport, this is before they had the chip that you can put in there now and bypass talking to anyone, but I had to physically hand my passport to the guy at Customs. And of course, in Customs, no, use your phone. So I hand the guy my passport. He looks at it and he goes, shit, you'll be happy with your new coach. So then that's how I found out that Dennis had come to Carlton. But and even it probably, in fairness, like it took a lot out of me mentally then having to go back and relive that with him again. Again, I'm great with Dennis now. Like I said, I caught up with him last year. And I think, look, as a side note, I'll give you this example. I know Kudo, who's one of my good mates, had written a book and then it said some not nasty things, but non-complimentary things about Dennis in the book. And let's just say Dennis justifiably wasn't that happy about it, to the point where Cooter and Dennis both go to Doherty's gym in Brunswick where I used to go, and it was quite funny where Dennis went and fronted Cooter and said, listen, Anthony, if you've got anything to say to me, you can say it to my face. And you could just see Cooter's lip trembling, not knowing what to say. And all I ever said, and I think Dennis had realised that over time, I just said, look, it was no different to you having an employer that you don't get along with, and we didn't get the best out of one another. And I think that's why now, which is great, that I'm actually really good with him. Like, it's quite funny, like me texting Dennis Pagan now, you nearly still got that. I nearly feel like sometimes not that I'm comparing myself to Man United players, by the way, but it's how, when I see the Man United players, when they talk about Sir Alex, and either they've still got to talk to him, you've still got that, you've got that utmost respect, but you've nearly still got that element of fear, but you're actually forgetting he's not the coach anymore.
Yeah. You don't have to rock up to his training every week.
No. Yeah. And even with that, when you talk about little things, I was only ever late for football training once. And I'll tell you, for the next 6 weeks, he never let me forget it. So, again, things like that I don't necessarily agree with, but I don't mind that there's having a good, healthy blend of it. Like, if someone has been late because it's legitimate, well, then, you do it and let it go. But Dennis didn't care. Like, some of the stories, as soon as if we were at training and we've done a look around the room and gone, is Mick Martin here? Or, of course, Wayne always had an excuse, but it was, look, little things like that, I think you just got to get the balance right. But, I was terrified. You'd never ever, I was late once and then that was it.
That was the last time you did it. Now, you've established a charity in retirement, Walk With Me, or not necessarily just in retirement, but in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I've had a few things. I did have an events company in Melbourne for many, many years, and then I had a good pub and I had a bad pub. And then we eventually made the decision to come up to Queensland. That was maybe 18 months before the pandemic started, so which was probably a smart move in the end, that I didn't even know at the time. But when I come to Queensland, I had no idea what I was going to do. The first year or so, I was sort of searching away, and I don't know, it was probably one of the really good things that had actually managed to come out of the pandemic. And then I think Well, I did. I saw a headline in the Australian newspaper that the suicide toll was going to outstrip the coronavirus toll. I was never a fan of COVID from the start, and mainly because of the messaging. Like, they were great at telling you everything you couldn't do, but probably one of the greatest missed leadership opportunities ever. Like, who was great during that time? Like, I know we had to deal with what we did, but were they coming up with any ideas about how you could, how could we get through it? How did they make us feel that we're not all in this together? You're doing whatever you're doing and going to work, so we're not all in this together. And there was none of that. But once I saw that headline, I went, okay, Wayne Swass, a premiership teammate, had gone through a fairly significant mental health battle, and I thought, well, what can I actually do, like, to help out? And then on the back of that headline, I come up with the idea. I thought, well, what don't I do? Zoom was obviously we all became experts at Zoom, didn't we? So then I thought, well, hang on, if I can do Zoom walks with people and walk and talk, and then we can share ideas about being proactive. It's not about how we're going to bring the mood down, because we all knew how unfavourably, everyone knew what we thought of Dan Andrews and all the politicians. We didn't need to get on there and have a whinge about that. But it was more about, okay, how could we get on there? And we did Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We get on there at 7 a.m, which 7 a.m. for me was a lot easier than doing it for Melbourne people. Obviously on the Sunshine Coast, I'm up, and yeah, it's a lot warmer. Even though the Queenslanders listening in, I'm sure that they think winter's cold. No, you don't. When the majority of people were logging on from Melbourne on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and it was pitch black. And you know what? It was not only the guests that we had, like we'd had the likes of Pat Raft, Eddie Maguire, Wayne Carey, Wayne Swass, but it was the everyday people, what they were doing to be proactive and looking after themselves from a physical and mental point of view. So that first...
You're building that community again.
Well, that first year of the pandemic, I think we did 105 Zoom walks. So look, at least I was in Queensland. I felt like I was actually helping people navigate through a pretty shitty time in terms of what they were going through. And then probably after about the second year, I then had to go, well, what am I going to do? Like, in the end, thank God the pandemic ended. And then I got the idea that we evolved into an official not-for-profit. Was I went up to a country footy club and they had football, netball training. I got asked to take training. And then when I come in, they asked me about, well, what's Walk With Me? And then that's when I come up with the brainchild of what we sort of done the last 2 years, which is elite athletes and coaches supporting mental health. So the way that what we do is that if we go to a football, netball club, or even a rugby league club, that in Melbourne and a lot of places they've got football and netball, so I could take football, Shani Layton could take netball. We then come in afterwards, and then we'll talk about the pillars, about how you can be proactive in looking after your physical and mental fitness. And I keep saying this, a lot of the things that we would talk about, they've probably heard them before. They've probably heard them about movement and all these different things, but the gems that come out, like one of the pillars we've got is reset. And when they hear someone like Barry Hall saying, I do meditation, if someone then comes away, I always say, we have these 5 pillars, but you might only do 1 or 2 things out of what we say because you've heard a Shani Layton or a Barry Hall in what they do. All of a sudden you add those 1 or 2 things that are not only going to ensure that you never ever get yourself into a spot of bother, but it might help you perform better at life.
Yeah, I love that. It's so inspiring. And so where is Walk With Me gonna go? Where are we taking it?
Well, I think I'm now evolving into another thing again that, yeah, we're just about to, as you know, we're going to open up a ice bath and recovery centre in Maroochydore, which we're not far off announcing. And I reckon what we will do is look to incorporate some of the Walk With Me values and experiences into what we're doing in there, because it's in that same space. It's about being, like, if we've got a recovery centre with ice baths and saunas and that sort of thing, it's about being proactive in looking after yourself. Yeah. For anyone that's listening, I think that's the biggest thing. You either don't wait to get sick. Like, you may as well play life without being too sporty. Be on the offensive. Like, if you're always looking to get better physically and mentally, well, you should hopefully never ever get yourself into a spot of bother. But guess what? You'll perform better overall at life.
Yeah, it's not a bad target to reach or to aim for to be better physically and mentally, right?
Yeah.
And as you say, not just to wait until you're at the bottom or until you think you are unhealthy.
And that's where again, coming back to some of the stuff that we spoke about with Dennis, that, I mean, even by having your own checklist, I bet you if I said to you, come up with the best all-rounded week and you had to write it down on paper, you'd see some, and you go, well, hang on, why don't you just repeat that? Like, you have that as a checklist. Like, I do that every Sunday, and it's not being anal about the way I want to go about it. It's like, I know that I've already got on my checklist that I have to do these things.
Non-negotiables. Yeah.
They're non-negotiables, and whatever you then fit around it. So that's always a good one to throw at people. Like, I say, okay, I bet you if I gave you a scrap bit of paper and you had to write down the best week that you've had at work, the best week you've had around anywhere, and try and think of the habits and behaviours you did, and you go, okay, why don't you repeat them? Just make that a stat. That's your baseline, that you know that's your checklist.
What's your non-negotiables at the moment, Paul?
I have, because we are opening up a recovery centre. I was already having ice baths. I was already doing them pretty regularly, and actually, contrary to what people outside of Queensland think, even our pool in winter would get pretty cold. But I made sure when we placed an order for our ice bath and saunas, I told them that they had to drop off an ice bath before Christmas. So I'll jump in there. Like, I'm up at probably about 4:30 every morning. I'll jump in the pool first, then I'll jump in the ice bath, then I'll come in, do my meditation, write out my list for the day, and then once I've done that, then it allows me to then come up with the best plan of how my day I want it to fold out. As you know, does it always pan out that way? Probably not. And I don't beat myself up, but I'll find I'll get to 80 to 90% of it. I don't always get it 100% right, but at least you come up with a plan. It's like, if I asked you how you're going to get home tonight, I bet you'd have a plan.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you plan your weeks like that?
For sure.
You know what I mean?
For sure. Love that. Man, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time. Before you go, the 5 questions we ask, what does success mean to you?
I'd thought about this. I think for me, like, I am living success at the moment because I'm getting to work on the projects that are aligned to what I believe in. So yeah, I know I wouldn't mind, like anyone, a little bit more money and earn a bit more money, but I've got a quote on the front of my journal at the moment, and there's a quote from like Dana White where he's saying, I hate 3-day weekends. They suck. He goes, I can't wait to get into work on a Monday. And I feel like that's with the projects. And again, I'd highly encourage anyone out there that's listening or watching, sit down and just work out, well, what are your values? I know it sounds wanky, but what are your values? What are I often use this example. Even if you could go to work and not get paid any money, would you still do what you do? And to answer your question before, well, yeah, I'd still do exactly the same. I'm getting to do the recovery, and probably at the core of it for me, it's like helping people. So even why I've ended up loving doing the US Masters, it hasn't been about the money. I love it when people come back from Augusta and they've seen Augusta for the first time. That I get a buzz out of that. And even little funny ones like the banter on the bus when we go from these vans that all you can imagine, like mates from Australia that are doing the trip of a life. I get more of a buzz out of that, and I think that's the thing that probably comes to the fore with me. If I'm in that space of like helping people, like I said, yeah, I wouldn't mind a few more dollars, but that for me is living success.
I love that. What does happiness mean to you?
Well, I think it's it might be repeating the same of what I've said on the last one. Like, if I'm being creative, you're being passionate, and it's aligned to what I'm doing, I think
you're in a great place.
I'm in a great place. Like, I think I'm trying to set up everything I do with work that if it can get me more into the strategic and creative all the time, that's where I'm really going to be in my element, like coming up with ideas. And if they're coming up with ideas that are aligned to my purpose, well, then I could work 24 hours a day.
So good. A book that you'd recommend us read?
The one that, look, I do read lots of books. The one I do like at the moment, because I have got a marketing and business coach in America. It's through Grant Cardone's company in America, but probably even the more I've read it, the more I like it. And I know it does sound, it's not wanky, but he's got that book 10X. But the reason why I like it, it's like if you have that mentality with everything, if you have a 10X mentality, you go, right, whatever you think the amount of effort it takes, and then it's like us with this new venture and what we're doing, I'm trying to come up with not only what I think the plan is, but then make it even bigger again. So that's the pressure I'm even putting on Pet to go, okay, you tell me what you need, and I want to come up with a plan that we stand back at it in awe, that it is like a 10X, like having that 10X mentality about anything that you do. Like if you're going to do it, you may as well go at it as hard as you can.
Throw everything at it.
Yep.
4 guests that you'd invite to dinner that are alive, not friends or family?
The ones that maybe spring to mind, I reckon Russell Brand would be funny. Like, he's very clever and he's very funny.
Yeah.
I definitely have, I think Robbie Williams is funny, and plus he can sing it, but I think overall he's funny. So I've chosen the other one. I don't know what he'd be like from a dinner party point of view, but I definitely, the way he thinks and the things that he's done, like Elon Musk, like in terms of, like I've put it on the front of my journal, I still think it's one of the most astounding things ever seen when the rocket comes back. Like, yeah, I don't think he really got the kudos for that when you really think about it. Like when you think of what is actually done, he's done a reusable rocket, and to have and when you go, I love the fact that you can look back at previous footage and everyone telling him that was not going to work. So my fourth one, if I had to, maybe from a sports point of view, I think maybe Michael Jordan. But again, I think your dinner party could fluctuate any time, but the ones that are funny but knowledgeable, I think they're the ones that you'd love at a dinner party. Like I'm associating dinner party that, okay, we're going to have red wine, so we're going to have a
fair night of it.
A fair night of it. So maybe I've got 2 different categories. I've got my good one, and I've got my serious one, and not my so serious.
So over chat, and then let's get
exactly.
All right, that's awesome. I guess that you would think would be good chat on this show.
Wayne Swass, if you haven't spoken to him.
No.
Wayne Swass, for those that don't know, he is my premiership teammate. He was a little bit of my why I did start working in the space in and around mental health. So with the, unbeknownst to us, the mental health battle that he was going through during the 90s that we had no idea about, like none. And in today's environment, it's a lot more encouraged and you can get a lot more help. Well, Wayne Swass during this time, and that's where it's a great story, that unbeknownst to us, it was only him and Harry Unlick, which is the North Melbourne doctor, were the only ones that knew about it. And even, I don't want to steal his thunder, but if you had to get someone that can really speak about mental health and articulate it in the right way, I don't think you're going to get any better than Wayne Swass. And unbelievably, during that time, he won the North Melbourne's best and fairest twice. And for what it's worth, how the hell he is not in the AFL Hall of Fame is a disgrace. So if you're only going to put one thing out there, make sure it's ridiculous. He played 280 games. He won 2 best and fairest at North. He went to Sydney, won a best and fairest, and all the work that he's done in mental health. I hope they put him in there soon. Well, he should be in there. I think there's people in there that haven't got half the record of the achievements that he's done. But I know that's a long answer, but I think you can tell he'd be a very, very, very good chat that I think you'd enjoy.
Corey McKernan, thank you for your time, mate. It's been great.
Thank you.
That was another episode of the Success Times Happiness podcast. Next time you're sitting alongside an AFL legend, turn to them and tell them all about the show. It means the world. Until next time, peace.